Hi everyone, welcome and thanks for joining us tonight for our GOTV webinar, the final sprint. We're going to get out the vote. My name is Leanna Strasser. I'm the training director here at Emily's List. I joined the team last year, and before that I worked on a couple of campaigns, including the Hillary Clinton campaign and Elizabeth Warren for Senate campaign. And I'm super excited to talk about this tonight because this November is actually going to be my 8th GOTV that I've done.
Wow, yeah. GOTV, love it. I'm Corey Warfield. I am a political advisor here at Emily's List. Been doing GOTV since 2006, and so done various across the country, various types of races. So I'm excited this evening to join you guys and talk about GOTV. It's one of my favorite parts of a campaign.
Yeah, definitely.
So tonight we will be doing our agenda. So we'll briefly go over our agenda. With just the next slide here. And so we'll start off with the welcome, and we'll have some housekeeping announcements. We'll discuss what is GOTV. We'll talk a little bit about the script, what's behind the script, and sort of why it's important to keep the elements of the script while talking to voters during GOTV. We'll take a break for questions and answers. Yeah. Then we'll jump back in it. We'll talk about scaling for GOTV, no matter if you're a small campaign doing a larger race. We'll talk about how you should scale for GOTV. We'll give some pro tips of getting out the vote, and then we'll end with questions and answers.
Yeah. So great. We've got a few folks joining us here tonight who are new to the Emily's List family. Welcome, hi, and hello. We are super excited to have you all here tonight to be talking with us. If you haven't heard of us before, we work to help elect pro-choice Democratic women up and down the ballot. We were founded in 1985, and since then we've helped elect 116 women to the U.S. House of Representatives, 23 to the Senate, 12 governors, and over 800 women to state and local office. But what I'm really excited about is this year, Run to Win, and over 40,000 women since 2016's election day have come to us saying that they want to run in the future, and I'm hoping that a couple of you are on this webinar right now. So we're super excited. Thank you for stepping forward and running for office. Our country needs you, so thank you. And a couple norms before we get started. So again, thanks for joining us tonight, but we don't have a ton of time. This is 1 hour in total, but invest in the time that we have together. We'll take 2 formal question and answer breaks, as Corey pointed out in the agenda. Type questions in the chat box throughout, so feel free if something instantly comes to mind, type it in. We'll get to as many questions tonight as we can. And these slides are internal, so respect the sisterhood. You joined this webinar this evening, and these slides are built to give our women an advantage, that edge, so to speak. So keep this all in the family. All right, but first, what is GOTV? It's when you get out the vote. So Corey and I were talking before this about different stories that we have from our GOTV experiences. One that I really wanted to mention was, of course, we're talking tonight about how can you plan, how can you prepare and get ready, but there are certainly things that you cannot prepare for. In 2012, I was working in Massachusetts, and that is a state that does not, we get snowstorms, so we get all sorts of things like that, but Hurricane Sandy happened GOTV weekend, and people were boarding up their houses with the wood, and so of course we had to totally sort of shift gears in the final weekend, figure out how do you still contact voters, which of course that turned to phone banking. People were at home, so we could make calls that way, but really being able to sort of shift quickly and do GOTV, because it's down to this. It's the final.
Yeah, you just have to be nimble. Just a quick anecdote from myself is just one time on a campaign, we forgot about the time change difference being delayed, going back an hour. So you should remember that when you're playing for GOTV, because it sometimes happens on that. And so we had to go out and get flashlights really quickly. So we went to the next Dollar General or dollar store and just got flashlights. Obviously weren't enough, but then we reminded with some email, text messages to volunteers to bring some flashlights with them for that last shift. And so it's just like, just being prepared, just being nimble. And if you have that, GOTV will be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love GOTV. It's my favorite time of year. So during GOTV, you're going to be contacting specific voters in your GOTV universe, and this happens in the last 4 days of the election. I've talked with tons of folks, not just candidates, but campaign managers and volunteers who sort of, ask like, why are we not shouting from the rooftops? Which of course we are shouting from the rooftops about election day being Tuesday, but sort of like, why is there this targeted universe that we're talking to? And it's because there's such a limited time, money, people, resources. And we know in the last 4 days, like study after study shows this is the most effective time to have the conversation with voters. So you want to be targeting just this universe of people who will vote for you if they vote.
Mm-hmm.
So there are folks who they're going to vote for you no matter what. They come out every single year for election day. They know where their polling location is. They're all set. They don't need that conversation because it's, they're all good to go. So we want to talk with people who will help sort of get them over the edge, will help be able to make sure that they turn out. And, I've used this example in the past, really think about, if you're in a state that, the majority of people vote on Tuesday, election day, and polls are only open for 12 hours that day, you can sort of think through, well, if the person is working for 8 hours and they have to drop their kids off and they have to run and go pick up this other thing and the travel distance, really, if polls are open for 12 hours, it sort of shrinks down the amount of time in the day that they can get to the polls and actually vote that day. And so it's the whole point really during GOTV is to remind them to vote on Tuesday, to help them engage in this plan making, which we'll talk about more. But it's making sure that they do fit in into their schedule that day, how to get to the polls. And so the components of that script, when you're having that conversation, really it's about social pressure, getting that commitment from the voter, and engaging in plan making. So, so we'll dive in a little bit more as to what that looks like.
So right now we'll talk about GOTV and sort of the timing of GOTV. Typically in a GOTV, the last 4 days of a campaign, it's pretty nonstop. It is from 9 to 9. In certain areas, you may on that Sunday start a little bit later because of church services and those type of things. So you know your community best. You want to hit the doors effectively and make phone calls when people are going to be most likely, because you want to have these meaningful conversations while people are there. And so this is just a slide to sort of demonstrate, sort of an example for you on when you could schedule your shifts on the last 4 days. And also you want to begin volunteer recruitment and getting those folks into these shifts. And so, we used to just ask people like, hey, I need you to do 3 shifts during GOTV. Mm-hmm. Are you available at 12 p.m. on Saturday, November 3rd? And like, yes or no. You put them a spot, you make a plan, what you're going to do for the voters anyway, you need that for your volunteers. So making sure that you're planning and you're offering that and you have this schedule out for folks as they are preparing and thinking about GOTV. It is never too early to ask for GOTV shifts.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely the volunteer leaders who will really be helping you out, like ask them right now for all 4 days, and they got to take off Monday, Tuesday to help you out from work.
Exactly. People take their vacations for GOTV.
That's it. Yeah. Yep.
You should make that ask right now.
That's right.
Actually, GOTV, it works. It is a science. We'll talk about like the script and those things, and those are done like by a group. At least on the Democratic side, the Analyst Institute has spent a lot of time talking about what is the effective things of getting folks out to motivate to vote. Just think about like, when you're talking to folks, for instance, like planning a trip. We'll talk about the importance of plan making. We'll emphasize that during GOTV. And like the more details you sort of provide, the more you paint the picture, the more likely someone is to do an action. So if I was like, hey, let's go plan a trip, I wouldn't be like, okay, let's talk about when, the location, where we want to go, what activities we want to do. visualizes people to get that. The second part is thinking about like, your preparation of it, and thinking through of how you prepare. It's like, where are you going to do your GOTV? From what locations? Thinking through the logistics of it, of the supplies and all of that. Just all the planning, being prepared, sticking with the script. These are the things that are effective during GOTV.
Yeah, and making sure you have enough volunteers,
And volunteers,
to help
exactly.
you get through all of this. Yeah.
It's a heavy lift.
Yeah. So as we sort of have already talked about, the script really, there's a lot of tested effective language in this. It'll vary a little bit, but not much. So this is really focusing on the social pressure and getting that commitment. So we actually want to remind voters that like voting is public record, not who they vote for, but the fact that like, thank you for being a voter. Like, you are setting a great example for your community and your family, and reminding them of sort of like that feel good, participating in our democracy, and bringing the family to go vote on election day. But people really do know if you're participating in sort of the community. So once you've sort of like thanked them, lifted them up, like this is a happy conversation. Yeah. It's not a bad one in any way. Then we want to get a commitment from them, and we want to reiterate the candidate's name. Can so and so can Corey count on you to vote on Tuesday? Because this election is going to be really close, and like every single vote counts. This person who is running really sort of needs you, and getting that commitment from them. It helps personalize this because, again, especially state and local races, these really are people who you actually know, who actually do show up. It's so close, and getting that commitment to help us really bring it down to that community and like personal individual level is important. And then you dive into making the plan. And certainly I've heard from lots of folks as they've done GOTV trainings over the years of it feels wonky, it feels like it's a lot of questions to get through, but it's really important, as Corey was saying, like help them paint this picture. When are they going to vote? How are they getting there? Who will they bring with them? If they're going to walk, is it raining? Do they have to bring a specific voter ID with them? And there's all these things to really like help them think through and have that conversation, make it super easy. I've definitely worked in campaigns where the sort of piece of lit that you leave behind during GOTV, you kind of write this all out with them, and then you hand it back to them, and it's like, here's your plan to vote on Tuesday, hang it on the fridge. So really engaging in this plan conversation, and sometimes this will feel much more natural with certain people than others. Definitely on the doors,
everyone needs reminders.
Yes, and their polling location could have changed since last time. There's all sorts of things that definitely
giving them no excuse to not vote.
That's right. Yeah. But so you're really going to have to scale. We've been talking about for GOTV. Of course, you're not contacting all of these voters right now, but you're going to need to be able to really, really ramp. And I know it seems kind of early. It's August that we're talking about this, but really, and even there are states that still have primaries coming up, I understand, but you need to be all hands on deck, planning now and getting prepared. So, as Corey's saying, being nimble, really being able to figure out how can we go from 0 to 60 or to 100. And I like to think, as the campaign saying, like campaigns are marathons, and like GOTV, this is that final sprint. Like you don't just wake up tomorrow without having done the preparation for running a marathon. So we're gonna prepare. Gonna go for a couple jogs.
Couple of jogs.
I don't know. I don't run, so
we're good.
Yeah.
All right, so we're talking about scaling your programs. And so this is a chart that sort of shows you 12 weeks out up to sort of GOTV. So everything you've done so far in this campaign is leading up to GOTV. It is like every time you go canvas or do a phone bank and do a launch, this is just like more practice for the final 4 days. And so typically, right now in your campaigns, you've made a plan, a field plan of how many times you want to go knock through a universe or make phone calls. And so typically, you'll see on a campaign that's, you started knocking in the springtime through GOTV. You're like, I want to hit this universe like maybe twice. And then during GOTV, you're like, I want to hit this universe in 4 days and 3 times.
Yeah.
And so it's talking about how do you scale up to that. And one of the things you want to do is to build your volunteer base over time. And so you should be actively engaging your volunteers. Right now, you should do things that sort of volunteer appreciations. Volunteers want to feel appreciated. And so all this will help you sort of retain your volunteers and to grow. And actually, after Labor Day, I think it's a good opportunity for you to think outside of the box on some things of how can you get more folks into your organization that you've built and your field teams and all that, more people to help during GOTV. So think of some different things you haven't quite done when people are now more engaged after Labor Day. If it's sort of doing, if it's a house party with a good volunteer and inviting their friends over, or volunteers you haven't seen in a while, having sort of a appreciation barbecue or something to get them back in. So you get them up so you're leading into GOTV. And so that's kind of what you want to do. You want to be planning now on how you're going to ramp up. You want to plan to see, okay, we want to do 3 shifts, 3 passes through. How many shifts is that going to, volunteers we're going to take? Then you want to have that number in with a flight rate, because not everyone's going to come and show up. We love if everyone did, but it's reality. Things happen in life.
Yeah.
And so something may happen where a circumstance, a person gets sick or something like that, something they have to leave out of town. It's what we do with voters, a plan. And so you have to also do that with volunteers. And so you want to make sure that you have more than enough opportunity for folks to think about it and pad your number so you're still getting the doors and the phone calls you need to get done.
Yeah, definitely. So definitely you should plan to do dry runs.
Yep.
Again, back to the sort of marathon analogy, this is the practice. The first time you will certainly encounter some trouble, some issues. For instance, you could pick a staging location that like seems to be the perfect place to do a canvas launch, and from outside, it seems great, but then during this dry run weekend, as you're sort of calling in to the other locations and reporting, we've got this many, volunteers here today and this many packets out right now. You could find out that there's actually 0 cell phone service whatsoever in that building.
Yep.
So this is why you should test things, and definitely I recommend 2. And of course, to the external facing, you don't have to call it a dry run, some kind of weekend of action. But that'll help recruiting folks to come in, say 3 weekends before election day. Then it's like, oh, it's this big Knocktober weekend. And getting people in to really test all of your systems, not just the volunteers but also the volunteer leaders. Are they all ready to go? Have you nailed down how you're gonna get all the packets back in and out and keep track of everything, really going through all of it to make sure that you're all good for the final 4 days.
Yep. So a couple of things about GOTV campaign training and/or retreat. Number one, sort of schedule and calendar. Number one, you should go ahead right now and schedule a GOTV sort of internal campaign training with your staff if you have not done that. I recommend right after Labor Day is a good time for folks to sort of come in to gather, reset. It's sort of a natural thing that folks sort of on campaigns and the general public is beginning to look at. So schedule that, number one. Also begin calendaring out sort of when your dry runs are going to be, like which weekends are you going to do your dry runs, what time you're going to do that. So getting all that set so when your volunteers and you're recruiting folks right after your GOTV training, you have I recommend putting big pieces of paper
Yep.
on the wall with like, this are the shifts and things I need to do, which goes to number two, goals and timelines. I've noticed that for me, when things are like on a wall, something visual, I'm not going to forget about them. It sort of nags at me. I've got like these 10 slots at 3 p.m. on the Saturday before election day I need to fill. And so that gives me like a constant reminder when folks are coming in to the office that I need to be hustling every moment, every time someone comes in, making that ask and getting them scheduled in here. And so making sure that you have your goals, you have them again inflated for a flake rate, and you putting that on the wall and people being visual about it. The third thing is a GOTV script. We'll talk about that in more detail, but just making sure that folks are sticking to the script. Again, GOTV is a fun conversation.
Yeah.
And though sometimes the language can be wonky at it, it's just making sure that every element of the plan is being executed, and really emphasizing that, doing a lot of role plays with your staff and volunteers in your own internal training, but also when you are doing these dry runs, you should do a GOTV script and have folks practice it so they feel very comfortable with it. And then also plan your volunteer leader training and sort of what the roles that you need. We'll go through a litany of volunteer leader roles, and you can scale that up or you can scale it down depending on your campaigns. But you already know who your volunteer leaders are. These are the folks who are coming in 2 or 3 times a week, the ones who you can call and on a dime will come and do something for your campaign. So even though you may have not thought about them as leaders, they are there. Those are the folks that you know and are already probably involved in your campaign. You just need to just make the ask of them to take on a stronger leadership role in your campaign.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, which leads us to the next, our volunteer leaders. So this is traditionally how roles for GOTV, and honestly probably throughout your field program from beginning to end, but this is really sort of how they're often broken out. Of a Canvas captain, at your staging location, this person is training all the folks on how to use the script. They're training them on the packets, how to fill this out properly, because during GOTV, you may have extra layers of, maybe you're not going back to certain houses. There's different things you sort of will be adding that are a little different. So having a really strong trainer, someone who has been great on the doors, but can also really teach folks and bring them in, help them feel welcomed, and get them excited to go out and knock on doors for those final 4 days. Then you have your phone bank captain. This person will, stay in the staging location or the office, wherever you're doing these phone banks. Some folks will be doing virtual phone banks on the computer. Others will be doing texting banks and calling. There'll be all sorts of varieties depending on the campaign that you're on and what you're sort of doing. So I would say this person definitely, they should also feel comfortable training. They should feel comfortable with phone banking and whatever the tool is that you're using. So if you are using virtual phone banks on the computers, this person should feel comfortable to help troubleshoot with the computer or anything like that. And then turf packet, this would be nice. I wouldn't say this is like a must-have, but in a staging location, to have a separate person that's not solely the Canvas or phone bank captain, but to have someone else who's really in charge and tracking all of the packets, phone or doors, to make sure that you are getting through your universe properly, that you are able to confirm your folks who are coming in. They're calling the people when it's 9 a.m. and the 9 a.m. shift has arrived. They're calling the people who are coming in at noon and confirming that they are going to be in a couple hours, and sort of going through all that, keeping everything clean. Then there's the comfort captain. I've seen this on different campaigns. Again, not a need to have, but it could be someone who's been super helpful in the campaign, but maybe they don't feel comfortable knocking on doors or making calls, or that's maybe not their strongest suit, but they really want to help. Food and coffee and all these things. Yep, sugar. All of this in sort of is them taking care of folks. It could be also the person maybe who's hosting like in their home the Canvas launch, and so maybe that's a way that they they want to stay there at the house during it, and so that's a role that they can have in helping the feed and water and keep the volunteers, keep them going. Depending on what part of the country you are in, you could have 90-degree weather and need lots of water. You could also have snow. Totally depends. So having these folks there to sort of help keep everything going. And then often there's a separate staging location, but of course, some of these places, some of these races, you will want to combine some of these roles. But the staging location director should sort of be able to look at everything, that 30,000-foot view, who's making sure that everything's going right with the canvases, everything's going right with the phone banks, turf packets are in and out, everything's moving smoothly, and they're able to sort of make the call to, the regional person to say like, hey, here are our numbers, here's where we're at, surprise, we just got an influx, a new bus just came with all these volunteers, so we're going to get through our packets faster. Like, they're sort of that person who's like able to take that step back and keep everything running smoothly in the staging location. So certainly staging locations, we want to make sure that they're sort of ADA approved buildings. 1 in 6 voters has a disability, and the disability community often is not sort of recognized as a engaged voting constituency. And wanting to get them involved, wanting to make sure that the campaign is accessible to everyone, so that everyone who can participate in the campaign and help you get out the vote is able to do that. So our friends at NICL, the National Council on Independent Living, has actually created this fantastic campaign guide. Highly recommend you check it out. There it is on the screen. It's nicl.org/campaign guide. It really sort of talks through, ways to make sure that you have thought through of all sorts of different accommodations, for those of hard of hearing, are there scripts that are larger for, folks who have low vision? For the food, the comfort captain, have they properly labeled all the food to make sure that people who have allergies or are sensitive to different foods are sort of covered? So would definitely recommend checking this out, this campaign guide that they have, but they sort of go through different ways of making sure that canvassing, phone banking, and even office work really works to make sure that everyone is able to participate in GOTV, because we do want to have all the help we can get and make sure that those in this community are welcomed and appreciated and feel comfortable helping us get out the vote. And with that, we're actually going to take our first round of questions. So hope you've been typing them into the toolbar.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ruby. I am the National Outreach and Training Coordinator here at Emily's List, and I'm going to be asking a couple of your questions to our 2 amazing trainers. So question 1, I've tried the GOTV script when volunteering on campaigns in the past, but it feels robotic. Will I have the same effect if I switch up the language?
So I think that the key thing on the script is really about keeping the elements there. So when I go out, it is, first I want to do the quick ID to make sure they're a voter who's going to vote for the candidate, and then I have to pivot to either persuasion, giving them some persuasion message, or making a plan. So it's just really going through and making sure I have the elements. So it's sort of like, this is kind of hard because I'm not a person here, but but like, just going through and making sure you're hitting the elements of like thinking of the time of day, how they're going to get there, if they're bringing someone with them. I think is thinking about those elements in a natural way. And so like when you're engaging with that person at the door, They could be like, well, one thing is like, well, do you know your location? This location, sometimes like it's literally a couple doors down. You're like, oh, have you thought about when you're going to work? It's a Tuesday. Are you going to work? Are you going to book before, after? So I think it's just putting the elements there, making sure you're hitting them in a natural conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And some people, it will feel really natural once you get it down. Others, they might be like, why are we having this conversation? But just power through. I always end it with like, happy voting on Tuesday. And people, that brings a smile to their face.
So. You can kind of tell after 2 or 3 questions, like if this person's like a person who like has their things together and like they know every, and you can sort of then pivot to something, a little bit like they're, are squared away. But I think just making sure you're hitting those elements in as a natural way as possible. Hopefully that answers your question.
Awesome. Our next question. My race is very small, and I'm not sure I could fill all of the volunteer leader roles. Which ones are most important, and are there any that I could combine?
Yeah, as I was saying, definitely, of course, you can combine. I think the canvas captain definitely needs to be separate from the phone bank captain. If you are having them in the same location, some places, maybe you're only doing phone banking in one spot, and so you don't need to have them both at the same location. But at the staging location, keep those two separate, because it's too many things for them to both do and keep track of. And then ideally having, if you do have, say, both canvas and phone bank at the same staging location, then have a third person there who's probably the staging location director, maybe comfort captain, helping with the turf sign outs, and really able to sort of jump in where needed and figure that out. But you basically need a person who's training on an activity and then a backup person to sort of help with whatever comes up, honestly.
Yep. Just be flexible. Yeah, with folks in like your volunteers, and so hopefully you'll choose a role for them where their talents can be lifted up and shining, and you do training with them beforehand and making sure they feel very comfortable in whatever role or roles that they have to fill in and pitch in and hit.
Yeah. Okay, great. We have 2 more questions. Our next one is, how is a dry run different from a canvas launch, and how is that different from GOTV?
Yeah.
Good question.
I would say that the dry run, like, it is close to GOTV. So if you're doing a canvas launch this weekend, it's not quite the same, because you should have close, it of course will not be the same, but you should have closer to the number of volunteers that you have more towards GOTV. So you should really build the dry run weekend to be a big weekend. You have multiple canvas shifts going out on Saturday, a 9 a.m., a noon, and a 3 p.m. You're really trying to like work through sort of all these things that you have not experienced in just one canvas launch. So the calling at 9:30 a.m. after you just sent that first shift out because your next shift is coming in and things like that. So it's a little closer to GOTV with like excitement, the size and scale.
And I think the key things to piggyback on that on the dry run pieces, I think what is the difference from a regular canvas launch? Again, it's closer. Number 2, the multiple shifts, trying to get people to come in at 9 and at noon or whatever your sort of time frame there. 3, I think, is like your volunteers and your structure. So having those teams and those people there, doing them at where you're actually going to do them. So right now you're maybe canvassing, launching from a park or something, but like for GOTV, you probably want them out of a house or garage, or there's another small office that someone is giving you and tying to your campaign. So you want to do it in a location. You also want to practice the communication structure. So if it's like reporting numbers, if you're going to do that, how many packets are out and those type of things, you want to do that in a dry run to make sure people are practicing that. So you want to make sure that those things are sort of happening there, and that I think on a dry run, you again emphasizing it, make it fun, making an event that you maybe not do during it's sort of the GOTV. And then GOTV is basically It is a dry run, but more practice.
Yeah.
Basically, is sort of what that should look like. Hopefully, you've worked out all the kinks in terms of communication and the location and the flow. The first time you go in a space, especially any space,
Yes.
it's like, oh, having people sign in at this door, there was too many people coming in, we don't have enough room, etc. So it gives you that to sort of work out the kinks, and so that you're more efficient during election day and during your last 4 days, where you need to maximize the time for everyone to get in and get out of the station location.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Great. So our last question for this section, what does a GOTV universe look like? Who should the targeted voters be?
Sure. So as we sort of said, this is folks who they will vote for you if they vote. So the folks who they're definitely voting, they are, consistent voters. We don't have time to have conversations with them. We're also not having conversations, with the folks who are voting for the other guy, or they always vote for Republicans, because in these last 4 days, it's about getting out those people who, you're probably still IDing them right now. It still will be IDing them in September and into October, of the people who say, yes, I'm committing to vote for you. So, those folks who you persuaded, who you spent time having those persuasion conversations with, and, now you go back to them and sort of like, okay, great. We can count on you on Tuesday to vote, and let's talk about how you're going to get there. So, it's zeroing in on these people who they will vote for you, but if they vote, because they need to have this GOTV conversation.
Yep. And I think it's like looking at boxes of people. Like there's a box of people who vote all the time. Like regardless if you did not exist, your campaign structure is they will go vote. They're just as motivated. And then you have who are Democrats or who will vote for you. There are people who also vote all the time who will not vote for you. Obviously, you don't want to GOTV those people. And they know what they got to vote. And then you have the people who will vote for you, but there's what we call sort of sporadic voters. So these people need to have an extra conversation. So that's kind of those people. So when you're looking into Van and those type of things, it's people who have a tendency to vote for you or for Democrats who don't show up all the time. And those are the people that you want to first talk to in your ID'd supporters. Those are the people that you want to put into your universe. And as you get more and more people to recruit volunteers, the kind of the more repetitions you can get, or you can expand the universe a little bit outside of that.
Yeah. And first-time voters.
Yeah.
So if you're, you've been running a lot of voter registration, or that, maybe there's a college campus in your district, and so there's a lot of new first-time voters, they will need to be reminded.
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's it for me. I'll be back at the end for more questions. Thanks all.
All right. So a couple of pro tips for GOTV. Number one, I think it's sort of, we've been talking about this, is being nimble and sort of staying calm. I think, with GOTV, look, you want to go in, you want to have everything planned, but sometimes circumstances will happen, just like life, that you'll have to adjust to certain things. And so I think being nimble, staying calm, because you've trained, you're prepared, and you're gonna, if you need to make those adjustments, I think that is sort of a thing that you should have at the forefront of your mind, as well as with your volunteers. Just some practical things. I think the second thing is obviously do not leave lit on mailboxes. That is a federal offense. So I think it's thinking about what are you doing in terms of your lit on for GOTV. So if you have regular lit, it could be punching a hole and doing a rubber band, making your own door hangers, which is a very cost-effective way to do it. The other thing is now a lot of campaigns are doing these sort of sticky notes, which I personally love because they're not very bulky. A lot of people get Amazon packages and things like that, and so they're like, oh, I got a delivery. Oh, this is just a reminder, but they'll look at it. So that is another thing for you to consider. in terms of when you're thinking in terms of like your GOTV sort of lit. Um, I think the third tip is like we had a question earlier about, the script and being robotic. It's engaging with the voters. Um, Training your volunteers on the script, yes, but also then taking it and role play, making sure they have the elements of that. So they're having a conversation with the person at the door, and it's a memorable conversation, but it's also you're doing the things they need to do to sort of plan, to visualize, to get them to vote. I think the fourth thing now, I think it's 4 or 5, is sort of thinking through your supply thing, the logistics portions of it. Ordering these weeks beforehand. If you need more clipboards, or you need folders. Some people do different color pens through different rounds, like a red pen, a black pen, a blue pen. So thinking through that, flashlights or ponchos, or going to Costco and getting bulk things of granola bars and water. So just sort of thinking through that sort of logistics or the point. The other, pro tip is, going and scouting your GOTV locations. Actually taking a cell phone in there. Do they have internet? Are you, those type of things, just making sure if they don't, are you going to do a MiFi? Can you having to log into the internet? So going before you even do your dry runs to these locations and scouting them out to make sure it's good parking, it's accessible, lighting inside and outside when folks are staying there late, just sort of going through and making sure you're doing those type of things. Those are just a couple of sort of tips for you as you're thinking about GOTV.
Yeah. And a few more specific ones we wanted to hit. Making sure to set up remote GOTV work. So as you were saying, making sure that the campaign is accessible, that everyone is able to participate. Having phone banks, virtual or texting banks. That's a great way for folks with disabilities who can't come into the office but are willing to do it at home, or making sure that if they do come into the office that everything is sort of accessible.
Yeah, and I think it's thinking through like your network of folks.
Yeah.
So as you're like planning volunteers, doing volunteer recruitment, just thinking through like, okay, I have family members who live out of state. They may want to help me. Is there a way that we can, either use virtual phone banks or using a van to set that list up, or other things like texting things where people can do remotely. It's also thinking about like, going through your network is like, if I have, friends or family, or I'm very active in like an alumni group that I used to live in a city, 5 years ago, or you have a kid that's in college, and they may have a group of friends who can't come back that weekend, but like could phone bank or text, so they're part of a club. So thinking through your network of people as you think of people who you raise money from that may be interested in helping you out during GOTV, and thinking of a list of activities where those folks can help you remotely.
Yeah, definitely. We want to get everyone involved in GOTV.
So a lot of people you got to have conversations with in those 4 days.
That's right. And so the staging locations, we've been talking a lot about them tonight, but really sort of wanted to sort of quickly visualize what does a good sort of staging location look like. And, having ideally separate entrances and exits, being able to really clearly label everything, having lots of space so that, if you enter through that door, you're able to get trained in an area, move over to a separate area where there's the packets. If you're phone banking, having a separate area from the Canvas packets and things like that. So being able to really use a well spread out and sort of like efficient space. And, I had one GOTV director who like really sort of, it drove home for me, picking locations that are in really convenient and very specific places when you look at your district on the map, because we have limited time, money, resources, and we don't want people driving for very long times to the places that they're knocking on doors and things like that. So picking literally the location, and then making sure that it is a good enough space to sort of meet all of the needs, and having the good cell phone reception, the Wi-Fi, the parking, you'll have lots of folks coming in. So if it's on a side street, the parking sort of needs to be able to accommodate everyone who's coming in, and thinking through, making sure, is there a ramp to get people who are using wheelchairs in? Are the doors wide enough? Are there bathrooms? And thinking through all these things, and there will be hopefully lots and lots of people at these for 4 days.
And packet land, assembling packets. So I think it's another thing to sort of, you may not, packets, you can just do that. No, think through it.
Yes.
And so you want to think about when you're going to do your packets. You want to put that on a calendar when you're doing your GOTV meeting and retreat with your staff and volunteer leaders. You want to put that in, and you want to make it fun and a party. And so it's like, usually you do this after, like, it's usually at night, generally, how this works, because you're still calling and doing campaign things. But you want to make sure you have things to organize, like, folders to put into packets and paper clips. And are you going to sort of color coordinate the first, packet, second packet, things to like store the packets in. And you want to make sure everything is clearly labeled. And it's also a good time for you to also do like a supply box for each staging location or person who's running a canvas. So making sure they have enough pens, they have extra sheets of paper, markers to make signs. If you want to do large sort of poster board, providing them all the materials, going through the list of things they should have, and then also creating a checklist and putting that into the box. So folks have that, a copy of the schedule. So these are the things you want to do in terms of packet land. You want to make these packets as easy as possible for the walker or the phone caller, as well as in case like something happens to, let's say I got sick or something, I couldn't run, like, and you can just have someone, a volunteer, come in and just be like, here it is, they understand it, it's very simple, and they can run your staging location.
Great.
And then GOTV reporting structure. This is more for a traditional campaign that has a larger staff. But I think it's like thinking away how can, basically reporting structure is really about communicating up and down sort of a chain. So thinking through this very smartly. So some of you may not have all of these sort of fancy positions, but I think it's thinking through a structure that makes sense for your campaign. You have if you only have 2 staging locations, you may have a volunteer lead at 1, a volunteer lead at 2. If there's an issue or you need to communicate who they're calling at sort of your, we call them boiler rooms or your HQ, that they will sort of talk to, who's going to intake that information. If it's the manager or another volunteer there, who will then ask whomever there about, like, there's a problem here, we need to run supplies, a voter has been disenfranchised, we need some legal help, someone needs a ride. So just thinking through how you're going to flow information both from the bottom up from your staging locations, also top down to folks. So basically just thinking through a chain of command, and that you have that sort of mapped out so people know who they need to talk to if there is an emergency or a problem, and you know who you need to talk to at the staging locations to if you needed to talk and give them important information.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
And early vote. I think a lot of states now have early vote, which is amazing. A couple of just quick tips on that. It is like election day every day, which is amazing. That folks can go out and vote. So I think thinking through your early vote, so making sure that's clearly marked and you're thinking about that in your strategy. One thing is a couple of states, they'll have different locations. So thinking about being smart and strategic on locations. For instance, in my home state, where I originally from Tennessee, the first 5 days of early vote is at one location in the county, and then the second week they have multiple. So thinking strategically about sort of who you target. You may want to go to a neighborhood that has an early location that opens. In Nevada, a state that I've worked in, they have these great moving locations, which is very tricky. It's great for voters. You can vote like in a grocery store or in a mall. But some of them, sometimes you're only there for 3 or 4 days. So thinking through, like, when you're making those phone calls, that you're or knocking the doors, volunteers know exactly what is the closest early vote location, the hours of that. And so with early vote, you have to be making sure that that information is up to date. People know it, and they're not giving people the wrong information from early vote. So it adds an extra step of layer to your planning. But it is a great opportunity for you to bank votes, and you can take those people off your universe. You can sell that to people like, you go vote now. I will not contact you for the rest of the campaign. And people seem to like that. So just thinking through your early vote strategies will be key, and just another step in your planning process.
Yeah. So we'll take more questions that have hopefully come in.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm back again. So we are going to do 3 questions to close us out. So question number 1. I am a candidate for the state house. Do I need more than 1 staging location?
Well, I mean, it depends on how big your universe is and how big the district is, because, as we were saying, the positioning the staging location to make sure that it really is well positioned geographically to all of the doors they're going to be going to knock on. That's really important, but not totally knowing the size. Can't quite say, but I would say, like, really think through, is that going to be able to get to all of the voters, having the one location that you're asking your volunteers to come in and out of?
I think it's thinking a rule of thumb of, like, you don't probably want your volunteers to drive no more, if you can, because if it's a rural district or more compact.
Yeah.
But you don't want them to be driving like 45 minutes to an area to go knock doors if you can help it. So I think it's thinking through. Actually, what I do is, like, you got your universe. If you're using van, you can sort of put it on a map and sort of see where your large clusters of voters are going to be, and sort of choose your locations. In these staging locations, like, most of the time, even on these large presidential campaigns or statewide campaigns I've worked on, they're run out of volunteer, like, garage.
That's right.
So it's not sometimes these fancy offices, or sometimes that you sort of think. So it's just being strategic and making the best use of your space.
Yeah.
Great. All right, next question. When should my campaign start planning to schedule out for GOTV?
That is a very good question. Planning out, asking. So I think if you're talking about volunteer shifts, I would start making my ask probably late September, early October. I wouldn't go too far out. People forget and those type of things, but I think by that I would have like a sheet of paper where I have, like, my shift times, and have people, like, have them, like, you go to events if someone wants to volunteer, and have them make commitments of shifts. Also do, like we talked about earlier, the big poster board things in your walls in your office. Also I would do that. So that's how I would do it. But, like, for, like, if you're doing a usually the rule of thumb is 2 to 3 weeks out. But, like, if you're doing a dry run, like, also getting those asks in that time frame too.
Yeah, and then for the volunteer leaders, get those in pretty soon, or like Labor Day, and you might need to have conversations with them before they actually commit. So starting that process, though, as soon as possible to make sure that you're all set. Or it could even be maybe maybe you have family from another state who are going to come in, and they're going to fill specific roles, and so they're going to fly in from the other place to come join you. So those bigger asks start soon.
The more time you want from someone,
that's right,
sooner. And if they have, like, work, you want to take off election day, they probably need to kind of Labor Day-ish should make that ask. Great question.
Last question. Who on my campaign should knock doors during GOTV?
I would say humanly possible. Almost everyone can knock doors. I think you just probably need a couple of folks. It depends on how large your campaign is. But you'll need a couple of folks to sort of making sure that if you're doing some earned media things, making sure that intake of just like various things that may happen, around election day and the schedule that you sort of need to do. But you want to put as many folks on the doors as humanly possible, where you have a skeleton crew that sort of keeps the operation of things you need to do on election day prior to, it's like staffing a candidate, election night sort of things that need to happen there, making sure that sort of the last minute things that you sort of bought and lit and those type of things are coming in, as well as folks who are preparing for you in case there's a recount situation or something like that. So pretty much mostly, I would say 90% of the folks in your campaign should be knocking on doors from GOTV.
Yep.
Okay, great. So those are all the questions we have. Thank you so much.
Great. All right. We've got a few key takeaways.
Yes, so a couple takeaways here. Obviously, we've talked about being prepared and planning. Just start planning now. Do not wait.
Yes.
So you should do that. Obviously, another second thing is the script. It's very important that you keep those elements in the conversations. They're tested, they're proven. They're key elements that this is about visualizing the voter to go vote. And this is the most important time. This is what you've spent all of that hard time in a call time room raising money to get the lit and the staff, and this is why you're running for office. Leave no voter unturned, and you want to leave it all in the field. You do not want to wake up the next day but like, oh my God, if I only would have done this or done that. You just want to just like leave it all out. You're gonna, like, GOTV is kind of harassing people until they vote, and you just want to just keep on doing that into it and making sure folks have the script. All hands are on deck. And again, gets back to contacting the voters in GOTV universe. Make as many passes as you can, as humanly possible. Keep on, again, harassing them until they vote. Leave it all out. You do not want to be like, it's the last 4 days of the campaign. So you have your list, you just burn it, and just leave it all there.
Yeah. Great. We've got our training center. If you want to check out any templates, we've got a lot of great resources there for folks. Perfect for people who are running right now, or also your campaign managers if they need some advice. We also have all of our recordings from previous webinars up there. This one within a couple of business days. This one will be posted there as well if you want to rewatch it. So definitely check out the training center. And a huge thank you to our partners who've helped make tonight and all of our trainings quite a success. But thanks for everyone joining us tonight. Hope you get out there and get out the vote.
Get out the vote.
Yeah. Good luck to everyone.
Good luck.